Join us today. We will now hear your opening statements. Ms. Boucher, you have the floor for a statement of 5 minutes. You have the floor, madam. Hello, I'm Claudia Boucher. I'm here as a surviving victim of an accident with a heavy truck that occurred in September 2025. So I will speak based on the impression that none of you know my story, so I'll tell you what it is. I'm the mother of 3 children. I'm in an active period of my life where I was intending to return to work full-time the week after the accident, still on maternity leave when the accident occurred. I was on a country road between Laurier Station and Sainte-Croix, which is in the county of Lot-Binière, near Lévis, near Quebec. And I'd stopped behind a school bus, so it's quite a busy road. It was a nice day, 25 degrees. I was listening to the radio, so I stopped that first time, you see, and a young person got on the bus. I stopped the second time. A young person came across the road and also got into the bus. At the third or fourth stop, again, I immobilized my vehicle, and my vehicle suddenly exploded. I was completely shocked. I was hit from behind, and then I hit the school bus. I completely crossed the road and was immobilized there. I was able to open my door and get out of the vehicle. I fell to the grass there, turning. I could see it was a 53 Safex company truck that had run into me from behind, and that I had, of course, hit the school bus. At that point, I was in a state of shock. There was glass all over the place. It wasn't really clear to me exactly what had just happened. Someone came to help us. The truck driver came to see me as well. He had his phone in his hands and asked me if I wanted water. He passed me a water bottle. And then the person who would come to help me asked why he hadn't seen us, given that the bus had stopped, the flashers were on, the stop panel was open, and there was also that young person crossing to get in the bus. And to not be hit by the bus, which was also pushed forward when I rear-ended it, that young person jumped out of the way. And my child was not there because they were still in the house. So I had my child who had just started kindergarten the day earlier, and my other children had taken the bus to go to school that morning as well. So I asked him why he hadn't seen us in English. I think he hadn't understood the question put in French by the person who had come to help me, and he had answered that he didn't speak French. Then he left. And I said, look, impossible that he didn't see us. Clearly, he was on his phone, he was texting, and anyway, he went back to his truck. And then the emergency services came and took over the situation. The ambulance transported me to the Lévis hospital. There were wounded people in the bus as well. But what would have happened had I not been there to take the first shock? So today, we see it could have been even more serious, half a dozen or even a dozen youth killed before we take action. I don't think that makes sense. So I went home that evening to find my children there who were asking what had happened, why I hadn't gone to get them. A big stressor for our family, and we can still feel the effects of that today. So I was diagnosed with a cervical strain and then more cervical issues, severe. I have back pain, cervical pain. I have hernias that have been diagnosed now, and post-traumatic stress as well related to this event. So, that's a lot of things. I'm not here to complain that I survived, but I'm here to explain that it could have been even worse. The youth in that bus have written me. I've got parents who've told me that they're very thankful that I was there that day. I learned that the truck driver had been found guilty of violations for not having stopped, given the fact that the school bus had its signals out, and for having followed me too closely. In any case, the truck came in at great speed, hadn't looked. There's no criminal investigation underway. This hasn't gone to criminal court. Why? There was a dash cam in the truck. That hasn't been seized. Why not? So I've got the SAQ, which is not exactly up to speed on what a TCCN is. I have been off work since this occurred, and I'm being followed up, of course, by many specialists, physiology, a counselor as well. I'm seeing these people on a daily basis. So the truck is probably being driven now by the same driver, as far as I know. He may never know what the follow-up is, and he's still working on this low-cost driver model. That company is. People know about it. We hear about this on the radio, and we don't feel safe on our roads any longer. Thank you, Ms. Boucher. Ms. Poulin, you have the floor. You have 5 minutes. Thank you. I'm Nathalie Poulin, and I am appearing you today following the death of my daughter. I'm really sorry. I wasn't supposed to break down like this. Take your time, Ms. Poulin. We're in no rush. You have all the time you need. December 18th, 2024. A truck driver left from the port of Montreal with a container and took Highway 73, leaving the highway, ignoring 14 different signs that told him that he could not take that exit. The first signs indicated that this was the last possible exit before Valley Junction because based on the weight of the truck and where he was coming from, he wasn't allowed to take Valley Junction. Another sign, several more, that informed him that the maximum tonnage was 10 tons to be allowed to take that exit. To demonstrate the truck and the empty container weigh nearly 15 tons. So it's impossible that if you were loaded, you would not be over 15 tons. He should have performed a brake test, which he didn't. Several other signs indicated the grade of the incline. He didn't take that into account either. I imagine he had no idea what they were. And the last sign that could have saved my daughter's life indicated a safety bed for emergency stops to the right as you're going down the incline. He didn't even try to use it. He probably didn't even know what the sign meant. I don't drive a truck and have no training, yet when I see these signs, they're not written in French or English. They are drawings, and I understand them. So how is it that someone didn't understand them? So he came down the incline much too quickly. At the bottom, there is a stop sign. There is a light. He tried to turn. He was incapable of turning. My daughter was coming. The light was green. That's all she saw. The truck turned over, and she was crushed. This happened at 12:30. They managed to get her out of the vehicle to send her to the morgue at 4:30 in the afternoon. How did we learn this? Because she had her cell phone with her. And when the accident occurred, we learned of it. You know, in cell phones, we now all enter emergency contacts. If you have an accident, when the cell phone suffers a significant impact, these people receive a text. Emergency services are called. And people also get her location, and emergency services do as well. When they left with Alexandra to take her to the morgue, we were able to see that last trip because Her cell phone went with her. So the first thing that we learned was that there had been this shock, this impact registered by the cell phone. We didn't know much more. We weren't too concerned. We never thought it might be an accident. And it was her partner waiting for her at home who headed out to the scene of the accident to see what was going on. And that's when we learned what was up. I learned much later over the phone, because now police officers don't go to the home. It's 811 people who it seems are trained to share this information, but that haven't time to travel to see us. So a charming lady over the phone told me that my daughter was dead. Then the questions begin. Why? Who? How? What happened? How could this possibly have happened? Through this, we've come upon shocking truths. I never imagined that I should have fought for my family's safety, to ensure that everyone understands that we're not safe. How is it that companies that don't comply with road safety rules are allowed on our roads? Why are we tolerating that today in 2026? This is unacceptable. How can one drive a heavy-duty truck without being trained to do so? You'll say, sure, now there's training that's required, but in 2020, at the federal level, you asked for minimal training. In Quebec, we were the first in 2023, but it didn't get applied until 2025. How many people now have permits but weren't trained? The person who killed my daughter, who hit my daughter, he didn't get his driver's license just the week before. He'd been driving trucks for a couple of years already, and he's still driving trucks because, given that the investigation isn't finished, the police officers aren't in their right to remove his driver's license. So when you leave today to drive home, look at the trucks around you. He may be a driver. Imagine what we think out on the road when we look at trucks. We just don't know. It could be him. This is really unacceptable. And then we had requests for a response from the Department of Transport. Something had to be done. The signage had to be changed. It's a very dangerous hill. They even moved a building, a commercial building, at the bottom of the hill because it had been run into by a truck coming down that hill in the past. Still, no news. We didn't hear any news. And a year later, they finally put up 2 cameras. So far, that's what there is. They had called us. They had promised a number of things that should have been installed in 2025, but now, so far, nothing has been installed. I don't want to look like a complainer, I'm not here to whine. In life, and those who know me really know this is the case, that I believe that in life we have a choice to stay home and complain or to get involved in the hope of making a difference. That's what we're doing here today. Had it been just to complain, well, I wouldn't have come here. There are no words to express the pain of losing a child. The proof is that there are none in the dictionary. There aren't any. Since the accident, we keep busy to try to make sense of what's happened. And that's why we are here today, because the worst of it since the accident is that no one wants to hear us. No one wants to hear what we have to say. We have made calls. We've called MPs, federal, provincial. No one wants to touch this. It's like radioactive. If anyone could explain why, I would really love to hear the reason. Is it because you're going to lose votes? What's up? How can people get driver's permits purchased in Ontario, given that transportation is a federal jurisdiction. It is you who set out the legislation, the rules. We had to fight to get here today. Could anyone explain why that's the case? You should have called us asking, what can we do? How can we help you? No, we had to push our way forward, knock on doors, push through doors, fight to be heard. Look, no one is ever going to call me mom. This was my only daughter. Today, there are people who are responsible for this, who go home, who see their children, and to go on with their lives. What are we doing? We're not living. We're merely surviving. That's what we're doing. That's what we've been doing since the accident. We're in survival mode. But I have hope, some hope, that this hasn't happened for nothing, and that today we will be able to act to protect our families and our children. This is your duty. That's why we have elected you. Today, this is a reminder that the road can kill, that negligence has irreversible consequences, and a reminder that justice, prevention, and collective responsibility aren't options, they are a duty. And we'd really like to be able to handle everything ourselves, but we can't. You are the ones who can take action. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Ms. Séguin, you have the floor. You have 5 minutes. Hello, everyone. I am Mélanie Séguin. I'm here on the 26th of January 2026 to have some of our legislation amended, which I think that they're a little archaic given how society has evolved. Here are my requests: an amendment to renew the work permit, amendment on the legislation for passport retention when accidents occur. My daughter and child and companion took a road, and as they were returning work on the 32 East Highway, the 10 being closed, there was a detour. At 22:30, 8:30 in the evening, there was an accident involving 8 vehicles, including a 35-foot truck. At the time, the 11-year-old and the 2-year-old and the mother, basically about 10 people, if I'm correct, were grievously wounded. And some died. At about 3 in the morning, the announce of their deaths came in, and it continued to grievously wounded Mathieu and Benoit. A number of traumas in reading was organized by the SQ in Boucherville, the police service, to inform us that the accident was of a criminal nature, given the evidence they had based on a cell phone in the truck, but said that Mr. Singh had left the country under 24 hours after the accident, and no legislation authorizes the seizure of the passport. And the accusations against Mr. Bajit Singh are as follows: 2 accusations of dangerous driving having caused death, 3 charges of dangerous driving having caused grievous wounds. And I wonder why Mr. Singh's passport has not been seized, at least during the investigation. How could he have killed 2 people and wounded several more? A foreign temporary worker. Is he privileged enough to be allowed to left our country in such circumstances? I don't want our story to be the story of any other Canadian family. It has taken over 3 years to have the person brought back to Canadian soil with the collaboration of the U.S. Marshals and the police of Boucherville. And Mr. Singh is now being held and will face justice in Canada. How is it possible that he could have left the country and that his work permit has been renewed even though he already had criminal accusations in since January 2021 against him, and that he is held to be a victim even though he is the person being accused in this file, having committed 43 contraventions to the highway code in Ontario and Quebec before he finally killed someone. I have a petition in E4115 with which I was helped by Ms. Claude de Bellefeuille, MP Valleyfield. Why aren't there any changes to the legislation? No change has been made based on my requests and my petition. Even though several mistakes were made in this file, I have all the evidence of what I'm saying here today. And behind each of you, of course, there are families. You have families. Were it your sister, your mother, your daughter, what would you do? 2 briefs could be provided to you if needed, and I hope that my requests will be taken into consideration today. Thank you for your time. Thank you, Ms. Séguin. Today, we'll begin with Mr. Groslo. Mr. Groslo, you have the floor for 6 minutes. Good day, Mr. Chair, dear colleagues. Hello. This is a very difficult topic. I would like to begin by saying hello, Ms. Séguin, Ms. Poulin, and Ms. Boucher, for being here with us. You are very courageous. I know that this is very difficult for you. I, too, have children. I don't know how you feel. I can't imagine. And I find you so very courageous. I'm here to support you. Again, thank you for being here with us. First question, I will put it to Ms. Poulin. Ms. Nathalie Poulin, you're from Gauss and La Beauce, and we have met recently. I would like to know what your intentions are. What's the main message you would like to get across to the government here through this committee? That actions be undertaken. We need specific measures to ensure that road safety is ensured. It's not an administrative detail. If you know there are failures, there are gaps, if you see that it's not working, you can't close your eyes to this. You can't turn away from the facts. You're our only bulwark. That's the truth. If we want to keep our families safe on our roadways, we must turn to you. Transportation is a federal jurisdiction. Analyze each province. You have turned the management of this legislation over to the provinces. So is it really working? I can tell you no. They are not equipped to carry this through. This is what you need to do today. Recognize that negligence has irreversible consequences and deal with this. It should have been done before these terrible situations occurred. Now we'll have to deal with it, but we need to ensure that changes are made. There's no choice. I'm speaking for my daughter, but my daughter's not coming back. This isn't going to change anything. But there are so many other parents with empty seats around the table, children facing an empty seat where their mother once was. And people wonder whether they'll come home alive because there are people who aren't trained, who've got trucks that are totally unmaintained, that have tractor trailers that aren't up to date. This makes no sense. It's your responsibility to ensure that change occurs. You have spoken of tools, mechanisms that we might be able to set up to avoid this. There are a number of them. Look, I've got this somewhere. But, you know, first and foremost, when an accident such as this occurs, the first thing that's at issue is knowing whether that person is still driving and whether they could leave the country. And I'm not speaking only about foreign citizens, nationals who are here with temporary visas or whatever. Roger, who lives in Chicoutimi, or Jason, who lives in St. George, could also, be the author of such an accident, decide to take all his money out of the bank and leave the country. It's the same law for all the law applies to all. It's not because someone comes from another country that it's, look, yeah, there may be another place that they can easily go back to, but, anyone can get on a plane and escape. That shouldn't happen, and it's up to the federal government to see to it that it doesn't. Licenses are provincial, but if an accident such as this occurs, it's obvious that those driving licenses should be suspended. We can't let these people go back to the road, go back to driving. Another accident could occur 3 weeks down the line. We know that this person is still driving. There is a registry. If it's an Ontario company, coming into Quebec, or the inverse, a Quebec company, someone driving into Ontario and is stopped at roadside enforcement, we've got no way of checking whether they are following the rules, whether the company is compliant. Same thing for insurance. We need a national registry, a national carrier database. You can't have entrepreneurs on the road and do it half-baked fashion. If there's a major issue with a truck, nothing happens. That's not normal either. Same thing as a mechanical inspection. We send a number of trucks who, pass. Well, it's clear that they have seen roadside enforcement and they've been weighed, but, the wheels are in poor condition. If I had that sort of maintenance, police officers would take my car off the road. They'd say, you've got to have it towed. But they've got killer machines. They've got incredible loads. How can they be allowed to drive in such circumstances? The provinces, you see, are unable to manage this. In Ontario, you can buy your license. And I'm sorry, we're not inventing this. We've seen this information. It just makes no sense. No better in Quebec. Thank you.
Floor is yours. You have 6 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Bonjour, mesdames, et merci.
Good day, ladies, and thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here with us.
The committee, these terrible and in some cases very recent experiences that you've had, it must be very difficult, and we appreciate you being here with us today. I'd like to ask each of you if you could speak on, in the days and the weeks after the accidents that you each experienced, you would have had to interact with many different organizations. You would have interacted with local police. I believe you mentioned the Sûreté de Québec, potentially other levels of government or other investigators. Could you tell the committee what could be changed to improve the experience that you had dealing with those different officials and organizations after the accidents occurred? What changes would have made that immediate period after the accidents better from your perspective? We can start potentially with Madame Séguin.
Qu'est-ce qui aurait été mieux d'être fait?
Well, what would have been better in the media after the accident? It would have been seizing the passport, because in under 24 hours after the accident, the person, the accused, left the country. Had the police gotten information from the Ontario Provincial Police, because there were already criminal accusations against this person's threats, for example, and there were already breaches of conditions for this person, and the passport should have been seized immediately. But you have to wake up a Chief Justice. There are a number of legal procedures you have to go through before you are able to do that. And the police officers told us that there was no presumption to the effect that, the person could actually leave the country. I'm not sure. I don't work for a police service, but if there's a breach of conditions, I'm sorry to say this, but look, to hell with the laws of the country. The person already is contravening, the law, and I was told the person has a right to take a vacation, and it could be prejudicial if we took away their passport, and it could be prejudicial. Well, whose is, at issue here? Whose rights have been violated? While it took 3 years to get the person back here into Canada, it's us, our family. So you have a duty to protect families from such drama, because I can tell you it takes a lot of strength to get through this sort of thing, all the administrative details needed before we could come here before you to speak to you in this committee. Because if we don't cry wolf in the real sense, scream that this has got to be handled, something's got to be done, no one is going to come to knock on our door saying, look, may we interrupt? We would like to help you. Not even the company, AJC Transport, as I saw it, that's had problems before with officials, the CNSST, that company has basically killed 2 members of our family and grievously harmed 2 others. Can you do anything at the time of the accident? Yes, seize the driver's license and the passport. That should be done immediately while the matter is investigated. Thank you, Ms. Siga. Ms. Boucher. I agree with Ms. Siga. Everything she has said about seizure. In my situation, what I find deplorable is that there was no follow-up. I met my investigator 3 weeks after my accident. I was still in a state of shock, in emotional turmoil, and they said they had done everything possible to get this into criminal court. The papers, the driver's license, the truck driver's license. He had a valid address in Ontario and another one in New Brunswick. He was working for CFEX that is based in Vaudreuil-Dorion in Quebec. Isn't that bizarre? No one asked, look, is this a real driver's permit, a real driver's license? We know that some have been sold. There was an article in the Journal de Montréal about someone who falsified driver's license. He had sold some in the Brampton region, and he was very irresponsible. But this wasn't criminal negligence. They didn't even try to prove that the person was distracted at the wheel by seizing the dash cam. It needed a witness. Someone would have had to say that they were using their cell phone while they were driving. I know that that wasn't checked for my car. There was no dash cam in my car. I wasn't using my cell, but there certainly was a dash cam in the truck. People who got in touch with me were the media to really, ring the bell, to get through to the Department of Transport, to the Ministry of Transport in Quebec, and at the federal level as well. I thought that the Minister of Transport would have been here this morning. I would have liked to see what they would say about my situation. I would like to have my investigator, who really cared about this, able to say 3 weeks after my accident, we have suspended his driver's license, he will no longer be driving, and there will be an investigation. That wasn't the case. So what else could I do? Push, challenge the system with the media around me, with social media. That's all I could do. My children were asking, why are you going to Parliament? Xavier invited me to, because Parliament didn't want to hear us, but we came nevertheless. We've had a press conference, and I'd pretty much done everything I could because the media had covered me a good deal. We nearly died. I nearly died in that accident. I could have died. But there was another accident in New Brunswick, for example, recently, and then in the United States, they seem to have started dealing with this. They have legislation now that will be adopted on the 21st of July 2026 that will really lead to very serious consequences, fines for the drivers, and up to $1 million for companies that hire low-cost truck drivers. That may be drastic, but I think that's what we need to do here as well, because what we know is that they are hiring these drivers, and we know that some of them have a model along these lines, to keep their own money in their own pockets. There are so many failures of the system, and there are some powerful people, some, people with power who are giving out low-cost contracts, and we have been victims of people who use these sort of schemes, and that is what we are denouncing. So, in my mind, the driver who was driving on the day of my accident was an illegal worker. Thank you, Ms. Boucher. I will allow Ms. Poulin, if she wishes, to add anything to Mr. Greaves' question. Yes, well, there are 3 things that need to be done when accidents such as these occur. I can't tell you whether this was a low-cost driver. I don't know. But what I can say is that it's obvious that there isn't enough training and enough vehicle maintenance. The first thing to do would be to seize the driver's license, seize the passport, and then have a special police squad that really investigates all trucks across the sector. That's what would help ensure everyone is safe. Thank you, Mr. Poulin. Mr. Greaves. Mr. Barthélemy-Duval, you have the floor for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Ms. Boucher, Ms. Poulin, Ms. Degan, for being with us today. Your testimony went straight to my heart. We've read the articles and seen media content, but it's quite a whole different story hearing you in person, and I imagine this is difficult for you as well. I've been watching this file for quite some time now, this Driver Inc. situation, and what's going on is very serious. You have my full support to go as far as you need to resolve this issue. I hope that a report will be able to be produced and that we will make sure that things change. I was sad. It's a good thing that I was able to hear your voices today. I have a few questions for you. I did a bit of research on the 3 companies that were implicated in your 3 accidents. In the case of Armin Transport, that is linked to Ms. Séguin's accident, this company is a member of CTOA, which lobbies and promotes the Driver Inc. system. This company was also implicated in a train derailment on January 12th in Muskoka, where the driver actually parked on the rails. We also know that there have been shootings in these companies' buildings in their sites. In the case of SafeX Transport, that was implicated in Ms. Boucher's accident. I checked up on the Quebec's registry of company. This company is reported to have 49 employees. On the company's website, we learned that there are 150 trucks and a couple hundred other pieces of equipment, and there are 216 trucks and 200 plus drivers. So what about the gap between 30 employees and 200 drivers? In the case of Verville was caught violating various safety measures between July 2021 and February 2024. These 3 companies were reported to CNESST. In these circumstances, given that it is being questioned that the driving model is causing accidents on the road, do you believe that this is random? The fact that these 3 companies have these things in common, and that the accidents and deaths that have occurred are random?
I don't think it's a coincidence. The person had an address. He was working in Brampton, and his driver's license was from Nova Scotia, if memory serves me well. And so Nova Scotia was his base, but he worked in Brampton, Ontario. And very oddly, wherever he went after leaving the country, very strange, the Orman Group was linked to his moves after he left the country until he came back to North America in April 2023. So I find this very unusual. Coincidence? No. Ms. Boucher. That's a lot of trucks for 24 to 36 employees on their website. Yes, I see a lot. I can say I see them from some distance. The logo is easy to recognize at one point, I left the SAAQ offices, and there was a Syntex truck just right there at the light, and everyone I know send photos of these trucks to me as well. So we started checking, and I can tell you it didn't smell too good. Ms. Poulin? After the accident, we looked for answers. So we visited a number of sites, especially the site of the Transport Commission of Quebec. We learned a number of interesting things about the Verville Intermodal Group. Once they went before the Transportation Commission, and the decision there was that their security code was be conditional going forward. Their situation was unsatisfactory, it would seem, and they had lied about the number of employees working here, that these people weren't trained for security checks, vehicle maintenance checks, so that's a problem. And it would seem that most of the contraventions that occurred would involve a vehicle that had been stolen, but there's no police report on that. They couldn't give anything to the commission about that. Their mechanic is a foreign worker who doesn't have a worker's permit in Quebec. So all taken together, it's a pile of lies. And nevertheless, they were left with their work code conditional. Mr. Collot, over to you again. You have 5 minutes. Back to Ms. Poulin. To finish what we began, you suggest or proposed some solutions, creating, for example, a national driver's license database, also a squad able to carry out vehicle maintenance checks. Could you tell us more? Yes, of course, a database would help, a registry would help, but, a squad. When an accident kills someone, why doesn't someone go to that company, impound all the trucks, check them all? There could be 50 people working in the squad, 50. It would take 3.5 days, and pretty much everything would have been checked. You'd check to ensure everyone has a valid driver's license, because a number of them are driving, trucks, even though they have contraventions and aren't allowed to drive. We check to see whether they're trained, and why not run a little road test while you're at it? Just about, let's say, backing up, because my partner is in agriculture, he's a farmer, and we have trucks that deliver things. Out of 5, only 1 is able to back up correctly. The others, drive up on the road, they park, and then, the one who knows what they're doing gets into each truck and backs the truck up, because the other 4 drivers can't do it. That's what really happens in reality. So this squad, able to carry out a safety check, could check to see that everything's in order. The trucks, the mechanics, why not test people? Test the drivers. Can they back up? If you can't back up, you can't drive. These are basics. Ms. Poulin. You have approached all the authorities, levels of government, municipal, provincial, federal. According to you, who bears the responsibility for this accident that caused this death? I wrote that somewhere because I thought it was a good question and an important one. The responsibility. And look, I'd like to say everything I have to say on this, Mr. Chair, if you will allow. It's a collective failure. I, too, failed. Same thing for Melanie's accident. Same thing for Claudia's accident. It's society that has not been able to protect these people, and I mean everyone. People who buy, their transportation services at a discount, they realize that if there's something off in the price, somebody's paying the price. If there's a big difference in the price, of an Amazon item, you buy it, you know it's not going to last as long. When you buy a carrier, their transportation services, it costs so little, then perhaps the truck isn't being maintained. Perhaps they've got a discount driver. A driver, Inc. driver, and people who see things going wrong on the road. They, see people watching Netflix film in their truck. They film this and put it on Facebook. Yeah, that's lovely, but call the police officers while you're at it. Perhaps by calling the police, you could ensure that someone doesn't get killed 40 kilometers down the road by that trucker. And then people who carry out the tests to distribute licenses. We got a lot of calls, people saying, oh, we work at the Société and, we give out the licenses. It makes no sense who we give license to. And I say, well, why don't you call this out? You're telling me you're providing licenses to people who are incompetent. You say you have no choice in this matter. I understand these people need to be paid and they've got a job, but why doesn't anyone put their hand up? And the Transport Commission should be a good deal stricter, and perhaps the roadside enforcement officers, perhaps they don't have the tools to stop people. Perhaps someone who's driving with a logbook that's not linked to their driver's license, why aren't they stopped? Why aren't they arrested? That's something that has been requested among changes to federal regulations. Someone who's been driving for 48 hours in a row, but you can't check it in the logbook, you don't stop them. This leads to deaths. From now on, I think that if the government doesn't get to work on this, the next time there's a sad death, then everyone here will also be responsible for that death. Because now we know, because we're shedding light on this, if you do nothing based on what we're telling us, if you change nothing, you too will be responsible for the deaths to come. Thank you, Ms. Poulin. Before I turn to Ms. Wien, do I have the committee's permission to ask a single question of Ms. Poulin? Yes, thank you. Ms. Poulin, you mentioned that you have spoken to people who distribute driver's license to drivers and that someone said, we have no choice. We've got to give out these licenses. Could you elaborate on that? I'm saying, look, if someone doesn't merit if the license, if they haven't passed the test, why should they necessarily receive the license? Could you explain this to the committee? From what I know, based on what people have told me, first, and look, I speak for Quebec because that's where I'm from, but when they go to the Société de l'Automobile with their driver's license from their own country, first, in Quebec we can't check to see whether that is actually a driver's license, a real one. It's written, driver's license in some foreign language. No one understands it, and they take for granted that, it seems that they don't ask too many questions. Then they help them, even if they don't understand English or French, they help them pass their theoretical test by almost, providing them with the answers. And then, all said and done, when they go into a truck to carry out a practical test on the road, they say, they've got a lot of leeway because these people come from other countries and, we want to ensure that these people have driver's permits so they can work and contribute to Quebec.
Merci, Monsieur. J'ai oublié les mots, Chair. Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Beaucoup.
Thank you very much for being here. You are so courageous, sharing your knowledge with us, your stories with us. It's so important to us to hear this from you, directly from you. So thank you for being here. You have asked us as a government, as a federal government, to take stronger action and I'm sorry, I'll shift to English.
Stronger leadership role, and because of the way Transport Canada sets the guidelines, we set the rules around training, etc. What more would you like us to do? How do we step up? How do we encourage the provinces to work on that enforcement piece? Because it's not our place. it's Quebec that does that. It's Ontario that does the enforcement pieces and the licenses. But what does it look like for us to be able to ask the provinces to work better with us?
Well, among Xavier Berthelot-Duval's requests, there are 10. The tax issue is the only one that is being really discussed. I think that the passport and the right to travel should also be priorities. I particularly like points 1, 2, 5, and 6 among Mr. Berthelot-Duval's requests. When I gave a radio interview, I hoped that the government would work seriously on at least one other recommendation. Was I optimistic, hoping that at least they'd work on one? Well, right now I hope that working on 4 of them is a realistic request. 1, 2, 5, and 6. That's my choice.
No.
Ms. Séguin, have you anything to add? No. Ms. Poulin? I don't know. I don't know what the best solution is going to be. But you have instituted mandatory training that the provinces must ensure. Why don't you continue? Do more. They need this minimal training, of course, but intervene across the board, everything. Penalties, for example, someone who doesn't carry out their brake tests, do you know how much they have to pay? It's only $500. That's the only penalty, $500 to, go down a steep incline and kill someone at the bottom. So expensive, $500. Even if they know how to put their brakes on, they can ice. If they put the brakes going down and they don't take them off intermittently, they'll ice up, so the brakes won't work. The government, the federal government, has got to really go back to the basic elements of safe transportation, safety, driver's license, maintenance. You've got to go over everything. You've got a number of associations that lay out all the problems for you to see. A lot of people want to get involved. So use them. Take us. We'll come in droves. I'll come. That's what I've said from the outset. I want to, as of tomorrow morning, know in my heart that this accident did not occur for nothing. That out of all this, something will develop, something will ensure that all our roads are safer. That's all we're asking for, but no one wants to hear that. Mr. Chair, I would like to add something. Yes, you have the floor. Perhaps if we had all of Canada law rather than having, legislation in each territory, in each province, in Quebec, there's an example. There was someone who was pulled over 148 kilometers an hour, $108 was the fine, something like that. It was at Télé Nouvelle. If it were $10,000, why couldn't it be a federal law that we all face the same consequences, the same law applied across the entire country? It's super clear whether you're in Manitoba, Quebec, or Ontario, wherever you are, it's the same rules, and that using your cell phone at the wheel be banished. Unacceptable in any vehicle whatsoever, because that, from what I've read, is what mostly causes the accidents, distractions at the wheel. This leads to deaths on our roadways. If we had a single law that applied across the country, there would be no confusion, or like, oh, but, I'm in Ontario now, or look, I'm sorry. 43 contraventions that this person had done. He hadn't slept when he should, leaving from Brampton, Ontario, when he's somewhere else. And now in Quebec, I'm told that there is no easy way to take him before a court because he should have been in Ontario, or if he were in Ontario, then the contribution would apply, but no in Quebec, and so on. I was told, Mr. Bellemare, the former Minister of Justice, told me that personally. So we need a pan-Canadian law so that everyone is treated equally. Thank you, Ms. Seguin, and thank you, Ms. Nguyen. Mr. Barcelou-Duval, you have 2.5 minutes, please. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Ms. Boucher, you referred to this earlier. I'll pick up on it. In October, I believe, we worked on 10 requests. The federal government did, requests of the trucking sector that should be used. Unfortunately, the government has only instituted one of the 10, and you have referred to this. I would like to know whether you've had a chance to glance at these requests and if there are any that you would like to specifically speak to. Perhaps, Ms. Poulin, you could begin. Yes, I have looked at them very carefully, and the one that most struck me is the one in which you mentioned logbooks not lining up with driver's license. How can you be in a situation where you can't stop a truck, pull a truck off the road, when you can't even validate whether the driver is in a state to be driving it? Because, you know, there's this logbook situation. The feds requested that. It's a rule. But if you've got a logbook, but then someone else is driving under another name and no one can link the logbook to the person driving, it makes no sense. It can't be used. This is pretty easy. You're stopped, pulled over anywhere in Canada, a roadside enforcement. You know, you see the logbook and the license, you see it together, and then, if necessary, you pull the truck off the road. It's the simplest thing to do, the quickest and easiest thing to do, and it is very likely to save lives. Thank you, Ms. Seguin. I won't speak to this for now. That's fine. 30 seconds left. Perhaps for Ms. Boucher, if you had the Minister of Transportation, as you hoped you might have before you here today, is there a message you would give them or that you would like to give this committee about how things should be changed? Yes, of course. The points that you have brought up in those 10 requests, I think they are all relevant. As for having a single set of rules that would apply across the country, I had mentioned at the press conference that that's what I think makes sense. I think that makes it easier to follow up when you go from province to province. If we had spoken about that via Alison Dumont and Alexandra Tremblay, we had mentioned that. We had talked about it, that if someone at an inspection, roadside point, if they're weighed, you know, when they're weighed, they have to pull over there and they're inspected there at the roadside, then there could be better follow-up across the provinces. We're far too divided. We really need a single approach. There's also the blacklist, or something about investigations, you know, of non-compliant businesses, trucking enterprises that I also thought was relevant. So those are really the points 1, 2, 5, and 6 that I mentioned earlier. That's what I would present to the Department of Transport. Thank you, Mr. Groslo. We're back to you. You have 2.5 minutes this time. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Once again, I thank you for being here with us, for sharing your testimony. You're testifying very well, by the way, if I may, and very courageously. Thanks again. My question is for Ms. Boucher and Ms. Seguin. What are your expectations? What do you hope for after today's meeting? What do you expect of us, elected officials? What I expect is that the human side of all this speaks to you and that you respond. Not necessarily human, but look, you have families too. If this happened to you, would there be some, you know, special law that would come in if it were Mr. Trudeau's children who were killed? Surely. Would you continue giving out driver's license so that they could come kill us? I hope not. I hope that today is the very last time that you will allow these people to come kill us on our roadways, giving them the power to do that. I hope this is the end. Nathalie, would you like to add something? Oh, my heavens. Look, today, you just got to get down to business. You just got to get the job done. Today, we have the ability, you have the power to save lives. That's what I've come to tell you. You have this power. If I cry out, if I speak to every single reporter, I won't be able to do it. We can help you, but we won't be able to do it all alone. You have the power to tell us that our families, our children, your families and your children, because this can happen to anyone. It was a bus carrying 45 children that was at, issue that day, and had they all been killed, would this still be going on? I don't know. But you have the power to do something. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I want to say thank you so much. It's often said that leadership is the act of servicing others and not yourself. And you're doing that today by telling us your story, your profound story of loss. And I appreciate it. I know every MP and every staffer here appreciates it. So thank you so much. I think most of you, the three of you here today, you talked about your experiences, and some of that goes to federal, provincial, shared responsibility. But I'm wondering, would you like to see the committee include in our report elements of the things that you talked about that are provincial? That need to be tightened up, and to share that with the transport departments that are provincial across Canada. Is that what I'm hearing? You'd like to not just the federal government, although that we're key here, but also sharing this report, this recommendation with the other with the provincial governments in Canada. Do I get a thumbs up for that, or thumbs down?
Je vais commencer avec Madame Séguin.
Tout à fait d'accord.
We'll begin with Ms. Séguin. I fully agree. Ms. Boucher. Yes, I agree.
I also, with limited time, when I hear of things such as enforcement and investigations and training or lack thereof, because let's be frank, some of the stories we've heard today and in previous testimony, the level of training is jaw-dropping, lack thereof. And I'm wondering, do you see a role for the federal government to be more involved in those elements that are provincial, or some type of deeper shared responsibility? Do you see that as something we should look at in terms of a recommendation?
Au niveau de la formation,
well, about training, it's basically federal. The provinces set it up too late, too little in December 2025, and so far it's not up to par. Do they still distribute licenses? I don't know, but so far the training is inadequate. They don't provide for it. It's complicated. But what worries me is that everyone who got their driver's license earlier and without the training, well, they're out there. Couldn't, a minimum amount of training set in by the federal government also involve asking the provinces to, ensure that ongoing training is provided, that people who, can't prove that they took their course over the last 10 years, be obliged to upgrade, go back to some sort of training such that the provinces could be sure that people are able to drive or competent to drive. That's one idea, because right now we've got no way of knowing. Thank you. once again, to all three of you, sincere thanks for having shared your personal stories with us. This is of considerable help to us with the report that